I already tried. This is on you. Ask our new councilman, Trey. He looks like a trip now. We have no councilman. Open up. Yeah, see? I knew that. My husband is not comfortable. My husband. I used to do my law right every night, and I knew she was not me. Just like a Southern woman, and I would walk in the hall and listen. Oh, and oh, and oh, Jesus. Like, wow. Yeah, totally. But it was. It was no. He wanted me. He's like, oh, yeah. Okay. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, December 15, 20. No, today is Thursday, December 15, 2022. The time is 5 p.m. The special meeting of the following will come to order. The Victorville City Council and the same council also sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency, the City as Housing Assets, successor, Joint Powers Financing Authority, and the Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Gomez. Councilmember Harriman.
Here.
Councilmember Irving.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Becerra.
Present.
Mayor Jones.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you very much. All right, so Madam Clerk, I understand we do not have a pastor with us for this evening.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lead us in a very short prayer, and then that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by our Police Captain Wickham. So if everyone can please rise if you're able. Father in heaven, we just thank you for once again the opportunity to come before you. We know that when two or more are gathered in your name, there you are in the midst of us. And we thank you for this great confidence that you give us that we can boldly approach you. Father, this is a wonderful time of year for so many across our nation. And we think about family, we think about the preciousness of life, we think about love and relationships and all about gift giving, Lord. We thank you so much for the gift that you give us in wanting to make our hearts soft and tender and kind and loving and patient with one another. We pray, Lord, that during this holiday season that you would work evermore in our hearts to form us into your image, to reshape us, to renew our minds. Help us tonight, Lord. Help this council, Lord, work together as a wonderful team, doing your absolute bidding for the great city of Victorville. We pray all these things in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Captain Wickham. We're going to move on to the presentation of the agenda. So, Madam Clerk, might we have that and any revisions there too?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no revisions to the agenda this evening.
All right. Thank you, council members. Any conflict of interest to declare? Okay. Hearing none, seeing no movement in that direction, we're going to move on to the introduction to public comments. Before I do that, Madam Clerk, do we have any requests?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and move on now to our first and only business in order, which is item number 1, workshop and presentation for public entity leadership. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. It's that time of year, and we've been trying to do it every time we've had an election, especially as we've had new council members seated here at the dais. We've actually immediately begun orientation efforts to share and introduce, share with the council member all that we do here at the city, but also introduce roles and responsibilities of those relied upon, especially the staff, by this council to actually undertake the vast amount of work and responsibility that this city is tasked with. So, as we're now newly seated with a new council person at the dais, certainly this will be new orientation material for Council Member Harrington, but certainly we believe it'd be a great refresher opportunity for the council as well. Harriman, what did I say?
I'm not the only one.
Sorry about that, Bob.
Your excuse.
And so with that, we put together a presentation. The orientation for Council Member Harriman will actually be over the course of the next month or so, including a variety of tours of city facilities. But with that, we've put together a presentation. We brought a friend that we've relied on for many presentations in the past. He brings great humor to a subject that has a ton of seriousness, and that's Mr. Jerry Preciado. He's going to give us a presentation, hoping that he doesn't use me or any other council members on this dais in his examples, but he's going to give you a lot of examples to kind of talk through and make this this training practical.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. I appreciate that. It is good to be back with you, all of you. As I look at you, I'm missing Council Member Gomez, who I was hoping to see as well, but Council Member Harriman, congratulations. Well done. I love coming here. Next year, it'll be 20 years that I have been working with the city of Victorville, doing a variety of trainings, consulting, just a number of things that I've had the privilege of working with this great city. And as we started this meeting, as our Madam Mayor led us into this meeting, and in the absence of an ecclesiastical leader, led us in prayer and then the Pledge of Allegiance, it just doesn't get better than that for me. And so I appreciate the opportunity that we have to experience what we really feel is the purest form of democracy, which is local government. Some of you have heard me say that before. The reason I say that is because while we have representative democracy at the state level, county levels, certainly the national level that garners all the headlines and politics and whatnot. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where people actually have access to the people they cast a vote for. I know they have access through local district offices and other things of state representatives, state senators, state assembly folks, and Congress people, even senators of the United States. But they typically don't run into them in the grocery store line or at Walmart or in a restaurant. And so the access they have to you really gives them a feeling of, hey, that is my representative. That's Council Member Becerra, right? Our Mayor Pro Tem, and she represents me. I love being a part of this orientation we have when we have new council members. So it's not directed just at our new council member, but a good refresher for all of us on some of those things that will enable us to feel success, experience success, understand expectations, and be reminded specifically of the areas we should steer clear of and some of the things that will keep us safe, our safe harbors, if you will, as we move forward in this role. And I just want to echo the sentiments of that invocation, if you will, which is my only measure of success with any clients is all of you working successfully together as a governance team. That's what it's all about. That's what the people want from you. I can't think of anybody, myself included, who would cast a vote in any elective office. And having been appointed and elected to office, I can share with you in my own experience, I do feel the weight of that burden and that trust that's been placed in me in that role when I had it. And that the people have an expectation, no better said than in my favorite, almost poetic section of the government code. I smile when I say that because few people can even find any poetry in any statutory language, right? But this is the exception. It's the preamble in the Brown Act. Let's look at that on this first slide. Public commissions, boards, councils, and other legislative bodies of local government agencies exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. The people do not yield their sovereignty to the bodies that serve them. The people insist on remaining informed to retain control over the legislative bodies they have created. Boy, that is poetry to me right there. And it's a clear message, very effectively helping us understand that you are about the people's business. There's a high level of trust that has been placed in you to think first of what's in the best interest of the residents, these stakeholders like business leaders, community leaders, religious leaders, etc., in the city of Victorville, right? We rarely, if ever, should ask ourselves in those seats as a governance team, is this in my best interest? Right? That's a political mindset. Is this in my best interest? What we really want to ask ourselves as we are going about the business of the people, is this in the best interest of the city of Victorville and its residents, businesses, stakeholders, people who travel here for work, etc.? Are we moving that proverbial needle on our strategic objectives as a city, the things that we want to accomplish, the things that we said to the people from our planning that we're going to accomplish? Are we moving the needle with this decision? If not, what are we doing, right? What are we trying to achieve is the goal. So I congratulate you on two things. One, whatever it is inside you that gave you the desire to want to serve in this capacity, because I know in this world, in December of 2022, you can get absolutely eviscerated on things like social media. You can be destroyed in other forms of media. And it feels like a very thankless job anymore in the world we live in now. Very challenging. But you're doing it because somebody has to. And to maintain that integrity of, is this right for us as a city? Is this right for our people? Is this right for our businesses? So well done on your sacrifice, your time. People don't do this for the money. They do it because they have a love and a sense of civic duty and responsibility. So I congratulate you on that and just remind you that the people do not yield their sovereignty, right? They demand on remaining informed. That's at the preamble of the Brown Act, and you might hear more of it when you do your every couple of year ethics training under what we call AB 1234. And they talk more about the transparency laws, that we don't want anything done in secret, no secret ballots, public open meetings, which is why we have an agenda and a marvelous staff here in the city of Victorville to ensure we post those in compliance 72 hours in advance, describing everything else that goes on in this meeting, including general descriptions of closed sessions. All of that because the people do not yield their sovereignty and demand on remaining informed of what you are doing. So that is the sort of foundation for what we do and our public trust. Oh, thank you for that. For those of you who didn't see that visual, our Mayor Pro Tem offered me a bottle of water, and I appreciate that. I just realized now when you did that I left mine in my hotel room. So there we go. Let's begin our discussion then based on that foundation of that public trust. And remember, there are things that have happened in the last dozen years in the Southern California counties. I'm not going to mention cities or anything else because they happened so long ago that those cities have completely turned over in council leadership, city leadership, etc. But so much happened that was so egregious that it breached the public trust. And even though it didn't happen in Victorville, we all get painted. Those of us who work with local government or in local government, we all get tainted and painted by that same brush. That local government is bureaucracy, they're obstacles to our goals and achievements and what we're trying to do as a business, as a builder, as a homeowner, etc. And this proves that they're just in it for themselves because of what happened, 12, 13, 14 years ago in our respective counties in Southern Cal, even nationwide, because I do travel. Started my morning this morning in Minneapolis and beat out that storm as I traveled here. Even in other parts of the country where there's Midwest nice, they would ask me questions about cities in Southern California because they made national headlines. So we have these stereotypes that we have to overcome about that public trust because we're watching the almighty and sacred tax dollar. When we engage in any transactions, interactions with constituents, residents, businesses that are not positive or favorable, it can have an absolute negative impact on rebuilding the trust that we have done such a good job over the last decade in rebuilding. You are to be patted on the back in this city for being part of the rebuilding of the trust process. I think you've done a great job. There have been some hiccups here or there, but overall, not like the level there were 13, 14, 15 years ago in other cities. We'll say neighboring cities in Southern Cal, even though that's a big region. So with that, we remember that we're either building or rebuilding or maintaining the public trust in the roles that you have and what you're trying to discharge. And we need leaders to do that. Here's the challenge with that concept of a leader, as you can see by that slide. There is no universal definition of a leader. Some of you heard me talk about that last year a little bit. I'm not going to go at it the same way because we could share a lot of different ideas about leaders, but I'm curious, right, from you, when you think of a leader or the leader you want to be, what is a characteristic that you feel like jumps out at you of the leader you want to be for the city of Victorville? Is there one that jumps out at you?
Yeah, so, well, no, I know. I'm just pausing for a moment. Yeah, so, no, so, I mean, well, let's open it up, Mr. Herman.
For those of you who didn't hear that, Council Member Harriman said he wanted to listen and listen and learn, right, with all that. And I assure you, that is one of the greatest qualities of the leaders that I have chosen to follow. They are effective listeners. They really are. So that's a great answer, whatever context it was given, right? Great answer. Listening to understand, right? One of the great leadership gurus, Stephen Covey, his fifth habit in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Why? Because it will exponentially increase the likelihood you're going to make a connection with somebody. If you're really focused on trying to understand them, you're going to increase the likelihood of connecting. So thank you for that. What else comes to mind, Madam Mayor? I'll let you continue with your
Mayor Pro Tem.
Patience.
patience, right? Patience is a virtue. And I would say that in the, 20 years maybe that I've interacted with Council Member Mayor Pro Tem Becerra, she has been the model of patience. our city manager said that I would do that. um, we have we have had some wonderful interactions in the last many years. Myself, when Councilmember Becerra was at the city of Victorville, and I can say that without patience, it is hard to successfully maneuver a career in public service, right? And so patience is a great quality for leaders as well.
Member Irving.
Thank you. I'm glad you posed that question because I've been pondering on this concept for a few weeks. And what came to mind when you asked the question was death to self. So selflessness,
Oh, very good. I wondered if you were going there for a second, right?
right?
No,
I
no,
went
no.
biblical. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Selflessness is one of the great human qualities, period. When we seek to put the needs of others, whoever that is we're serving, before ourselves, whether we do it in the, the micro unit of society, the family, when we do it for members of our community, our faith, our, volunteer groups, wherever we find ourselves, certainly in public service.
I'm working on that.
Yeah, we are doing amazing, amazing things, and good things come out of it. It's very apropos. It's very consistent with a couple of the quotes that I'm going to share with you in a moment. Madam Mayor.
So I remember from our last meeting, you immediately said you're definitely an A-type personality. So here we go again. So piggybacking a little bit on what Member Irving said, because I too am always about starting at the issue of the heart, who we are in our inmost being, and I'm so thankful that you said there's no universally accepted definition of a leader, because you know what, there's not, and people have made gazillions of dollars on amazing books about leadership and what it is, and how to be a good leader, and how to have a good team, and all of those things. But I think at the end of the day, it has to be, we can glean and learn a lot of things from a lot of different people, but at the end of the day, we have to wear our own suit, right? We have to be our authentic selves, right? And I think for me, it starts with humility and selflessness, right? It has to be genuine, but then, an absolute caring for those that you work with, and wanting to leave a good legacy, a high standard for others who are going to follow in your place, right? But, so if we really want to add value, as Dr. Kanisha Williams in our community says, it's about, and John Maxwell for sure too, it is about adding value to our community, adding value to those around us. I believe in that. But how do we do that? How do we really do that? We have to do more than care. We have to do more than have patience. We have to do more than have integrity. Those are all vital, but we have to take the time to study and learn and gain the skill set and grow our talent in what we do so that we can be effective. That's no small thing. And we have to have a thick skin, because it's no easy task, let me tell you. So that's just
Thank you.
the nuts and bolts for me.
Yeah. I asked for equality and you gave me a half dozen there, right? So I'm not going to echo my idea of a type A personality. I'm just going to say that is all of which I agree with. The one that really jumped out at me that you said and resonated with me, there were two. One is humility, the other is caring. They go hand in hand. There's an age-old expression, and I do mean old because it's been around forever. It predates all of us in this room. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And that is true for my city leaders who lead the operation of this great city. You may be the most knowledgeable leader of a public organization, local government, that there is. But if they don't feel a sense of caring about you, it will be hard for them to follow. It will be hard. They need to know that you care. Many people have said it, a few get credit for the statements, that, managers have people that work for them, right? Leaders have people that follow them. Leaders have fans, right? And that's certainly what we're looking at as we see the development of our own leadership team here in Victorville, in everything they do for us. And so caring is critical. The humility part's important because in this role right here as a governance team, there is, because I have the privilege of working with many councils over the years, there is a tendency for a variety of reasons to feel this need to be right? As if you have the right paradigm, right, to lead the city of Victorville. There are 8 billion paradigms on planet Earth, and there's only one for each of you. The likelihood of any one of us in this room or anyone watching our meeting today having the single right paradigm out of 8 billion is virtually impossible, right? It's not impossible, but it's awfully arrogant to think we have the single right way of answering the question on the agenda before us at any given time. That my way is the right way when there are so many discretionary ways at looking at things. Once in a while, we do run into a single right way when we're talking about a federal regulation that must be adhered to, a state law, county ordinance, etc. So there is a right way when it comes to alignment with those things, but so many decisions you make in your role as a governance team member are discretionary. And so there are multiple ways to get there. And it's important, if we're going to be an effective governance team, that we develop a paradigm respecting culture. Let's not be dismissive of each other's paradigms. Let's not marginalize or minimize other people's. Let's just say, hey, clearly we don't agree, but it doesn't follow that we should be disagreeable, right? There's good conflict, which leads to advances in science, medicine, social justice. And then there's bad conflict that leads to wedges being driven into relationships between council members, between a governance team. And there's a consistent 3-2 vote, a consistent 4-1 vote, a consistent fill in the blank, right? Those wedges do not need to happen. They just don't. They're a byproduct of a non-paradigm respecting governance team. And so humility, still speaking on that point, suggests this. There's a Post-it note that I keep in my head that says this: Dear Jerry, if you want to develop effective, harmonious relationships, you're going to have to give up your insistence on being right, right? Sincerely, humility. And when I gave up my insistence on being right, which was like my manna from heaven in my 20s and early 30s, I'm 57 in case you're wondering. So a long time ago, I started to realize in my late 30s that being right cost me way too much. Doing the right thing is so much more valuable and brings me so much more. What is the right thing for this governance team on this issue that is consistent with our objectives for achieving the best for the city of Victorville? Not, I need to be right. I need to look right to people sitting out on these chairs, to people who are monitoring us via the internet or some other mechanism. That's who I want to look right with. Or is it, I want to do what's right for this situation, for our residents, business holders, etc. So those are all great qualities. Thank you all for sharing those. And the list would go on, right, of qualities we can see in a leader. A couple of quotes I think will be instructive, just to make a couple of points here. Peter Drucker's often quoted, a longtime management leadership guru. This is one that I find very simplistic, but yet effective. The only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. So it sounds simple enough, but as I said earlier, followers align themselves because they see the vision that you are leading us to and want to be a part of it. They hitch their proverbial wagon to you leading this wagon train as a governance team, sometimes as individuals, right? There are several people who felt strongly that we needed a Councilman Harriman here. So now we have Member Harriman as part of this governance team, right? Whether they continue to be followers and you continue to have your followers will depend largely on what you do as a collective, not just as individuals. Because your responsibility is to the whole, not to any one group or any one interested party, right, who may or may not have helped you along the way. It is to the collective. When people brought you here to this point of entrustment, their hope and expectation is that you would do those things and discharge your duties and responsibilities that would maintain and build trust in the residents of this great city and others, not that you would act for a few at the sacrifice of the many, right? So that's a key to what we do. So the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. A more modern version of him is a scholar named Joseph Nye, typically at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, in and out of the White House, depending on the administration, who tells us that leaders basically, there's three things with leaders: leaders, followers, and context. When the context changes, different leaders emerge, right? When we had this pandemic, different leaders in the city of Victorville emerged, right? We have our leadership team, but others who understood adaptability and flexibility, they sort of rose to the top to help us find solutions. They may not have even had a title of a leader, but their leadership helped us really bridge a very difficult time for everybody in this grand global, social experiment of remote or hybrid work. And so we're grateful for them. So when the context changes, how well equipped are each of you to deal with those things that happen? The economic downturn of 2008 to about 2012, 13, right? We needed different versions of leaders to emerge. Wasn't the same ones who were the leaders before 2008, unless they had that understanding of the economic impact of those things. So my point there is simply this. Followers are critical because they can usurp power when they don't feel like their leaders are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They can withhold following, which no longer really, according to this definition, makes a leader in many contexts. So be mindful of that through Peter Drucker. Although my favorite quote of his, something that I feel like our good city manager leads us in here in the city of Victorville, Peter Drucker said, "There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all." And so we may be the best at this, but ask ourselves, why do we do this? And I feel like your leadership team here that you have appointed, if you will, to lead this city, and the directors in this city are doing a pretty good job of finding those things that we may be really good at, but don't need to be doing. And we eliminate them. That creates tremendous efficiencies at different levels in the city. So Peter Drucker always sticks with me on that one. Mother Teresa is one of my muses, if you will. I have a little Mother Teresa statue with 6 other figures on my desk. And sometimes, I hope this doesn't characterize me in too crazy a way, but sometimes I talk to her in my head about something I'm trying to solve. And I think, what would Mother Teresa do in this situation? I love this statement. Your true character is most accurately measured by how you treat those who can do nothing for you. There are folks here, right, in this city, business owners, residents, people who are employed here, etc., who can do nothing for you. And are we effectively keeping their interests in our hearts, right, in our work to ensure we are doing what's best for this great city and all of those who touch it? So I love this, and it suggests that we should be uniform and consistent in treating people with dignity and respect as leaders. And the last one that's instructive is Sam Walton, who is an icon in American history, and I think will be more so in the years to come, long after I'm gone, as they study his impact. Leaders must always put their people before themselves. This goes to Member Irving's statement. If you do that, your business will take care of itself. Now, it sounds like a business statement, but remember what we read in the preamble, right, to the Brown Act. You are about the people's business. There is no more important business than that. And if you put the people first, the business will take care of itself. I remember an actor by the name of Gordon Jump, who was doing a sort of a public service announcement. He was the boss on 70s show. I'm really dating myself here. Some of you won't even know this reference. WKRP in Cincinnati, Gordon Jump. He was also the Maytag repairman, if you know that those commercials. So he said this. There was a little boy who was waiting for his dad to come home. And he said, "Hey, Dad," as soon as Dad walked in, "will you play with me?" And the dad says, "Not right now, later. I'm really tired. I just need to relax for a minute, then I'll play with you." So the boy thought later, okay, so he comes back 3 minutes later, because it's later, right? "Dad, will you play with me?" And the dad, not wanting to say no again, saw a map, right, of the world right here, probably out of a National Geographic or something. He tore it up and told the son, "Look, here's a puzzle. Put that puzzle of the world together, and I will play with you when you're done," thinking that would buy him some time. Well, he didn't even realize it, but the son comes back in just a few minutes. And the dad says, "How did you put that together so quickly?" He says, "Oh, it was easy, Dad. On the back of the map of the world was a map of the home. I just put the home together and the world fell into place." I love that story, right? The principle, the parable of it, if you will. Here, if you put the people first, the business of the people will fall into place. It will. And you will leave a remarkable legacy as a governance team. The only thing holding this governance team back from being the best governance team in the history of Victorville would be you, right? The only obstacle you have before yourself in being the most effective governance team we've ever had are the ones you place before yourselves. So let's not do that. Let's eliminate those paradigm projecting moments where we need to be right and focus on the greater good of the people, and then those good things will happen. Put the people first and the business will take care of itself. So while there's no universal definition of a leader, there is an almost universal definition of leadership, right? And that is a pretty straightforward one that crosses international boundaries. I've never done any work in Asia, so I can't speak to that, but I imagine this would carry weight there too. I have done work in Latin America and connected to that situation. So here's what it is right here. The ability to provide a common or shared objective, then motivating a group to achieve that objective. The ability to provide a common or shared objective and then motivating a group to achieve that objective. Leadership can be exercised by anyone, right? Of the many employees we have working for the city of Victorville, if we just expected those with the title of supervisor or above to engage in leadership, we would not have a very effective organization. This is not limited. There's many books out there that our good mayor referenced earlier, a lot of books written out there, some of them very good, some of them not. But one little book written, gosh, at least 2-3 decades ago, a little weekend knockout kind of book. You don't need a title to be a leader. I think the author's name was Sanborn. I read it years ago and it helped me realize there are some people who just have natural leadership abilities because they know how to provide or develop a common or shared objective and then motivate people to achieve those objectives. Sometimes they emerge in a workplace setting when allowed to really grow and we harness their talents. We really ride their leadership and until they can be promoted into a leadership role at some point with experience, know-how, etc. So this leadership right here, with all of my city clients, special districts in California, counties, other local entities, school districts, I will share with you the one thing that I observe is that everybody, and I mean everybody, is yearning for leadership. What are the common or shared objectives? I am not trying to make anyone uncomfortable with these next queries. I'm just curious, right? If you feel we need leadership in Victorville, and then if you know that we're looking to you to trigger and to lead us in this regard. But a city should have its strategic objectives, right? A strategic plan. What are we going to accomplish in the next 3, 5, 10 years? What are we doing to lay the foundation for the Victorville in 2050 and 2075, right? There may be things that have to come long after you, but what are we doing as we think ahead to a sustainable city of Victorville? So what are our strategic objectives? And are those understood by those who are the boots on the ground leading those employees in Victorville who will embrace that vision and carry it out? Right? Do we all understand what those are? I'm not going to quiz anybody, say, hey, what are our 3-year goals or 5-year goals or 10-year goals? What is it we're trying to move that needle on? But that is what we need. And as we get to these next couple of slides, you'll see that is a critical role for this team, or be reminded of that. But we're yearning for it. Years ago, when I was following a leader who clearly didn't know where they were going, it was so frustrating. And anytime I tried to assist or help in that regard, basically, offering help where it wasn't requested, it was met with derision, disdain, and I just realized I wasn't happy in an environment where I was following somebody who wasn't sure where they were leading us. And so I vowed at that point when I left that organization that I would never choose to follow someone who didn't know where they were going. Does this governance team know where it's going and where it's leading the people, the businesses, and all the stakeholders of Victorville? So we need your collective leadership. So I welcome again Member Harriman to this great City Council of Victorville and say, this is the new makeup and we need you. We need you to be a part of this leadership effort. And here is the context for that leadership, right? Here's what we're looking for. There are 4 basic areas that a governance team focuses on to be effective. Now, later on, or for some of you who've been there, you'll recognize some of these. They're repeated at places like the League of California Cities when they do their institutes and whatnot. But here's where it all begins. We need to provide a shared vision. We need to set the direction. How on earth are we supposed to look to our city manager and then the directors after that and then the managers after that and say, hey, how are we doing on achieving these outcomes that we are looking to achieve? If we haven't set the vision, it's always that effect. Here are the strategic objectives, our goals and objectives. Our executive leader takes those and makes sure they are distributed to the relevant divisions, departments, etc. Those directors take those and break those down to the respective managers, who then give assignments to individuals. Not only does that lead to measurable success in a city, it leads to a greater sense of belonging for the employees of that city. And when employees feel like they belong, and the research is very clear on this, 40% of employees, just the labor force in general, do not feel like they belong in their workplace environments. That's not limited to people of color, historically underrepresented groups. That's across the board. 40% of the labor force do not feel a sense of belonging. This is a worthwhile endeavor if all we do is help our employees feel like they belong. And the reason that matters is because we care about people, number one. But number two, when you feel like you belong at a city, you're an organization, but we'll say city for our purposes, and you're working there and you belong, your performance improves by 56%, according to the research. Now think about that. An employee who's doing their job, discharging their duties and responsibilities, so they're doing fine. They're going to get a meets expectations or above performance evaluation, even if they don't feel like they belong. They're still doing their job because they're a good person of character who believes in an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. But if they did feel a sense of belonging, they would go from meeting expectations to superstar, because they would increase by 56%, right? Exceeds, outstanding, whatever our measures are. Not only that, but there is a 50% reduction. So that's 56, the 50% reduction in turnover. That's a big deal in today's world, as everyone's struggling to find capable, talented, experienced people with the relevant talents and tools that we need. 50% reduction in turnover. There is a 75% reduction when people feel like they belong, a 75% reduction in use of sick time. Now that's true in every organization, right? When people feel like they belong. Why? Because they don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I have to go to that place, right? And if they have some PTO time, they're going to take it. They say instead, all right, I get to go be a part of something. Why? Because they feel like they belong. And lastly, there's almost 170% more likelihood that they are going to promote the city of Victorville as a great place to work and help you attract and retain those people. And so why does that all matter? Going back to leadership and setting a vision, because as you set that vision, it trickles down. It gets down to these employees down here, and they understand their role, and they understand why they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they understand that when I do this, I'm contributing to the greater good that my department's doing for the city to achieve X, Y, or Z. Knowing your role and being able to discharge that really is a key element in feeling like you belong and you're part of something bigger than yourself. And I love that idea. All starts with this group setting a vision as a governance team. So I always encourage you, you never have enough time or enough resources, but I always encourage those off-site strategic planning sessions to retool, refine, modify, whatever we need to do, our objectives, right? We don't always have to reinvent the wheel at every one of those, but look at our objectives and see where they're at and see what we can do. Any questions on that first one, setting a vision?
Anyone?
All right. The second part then is making sure that we understand what we expect of our people who operate within the parameters of the city of Victorville as employees, contractors, service providers. That would include someone like me as a service provider to the city of Victorville. How do we determine how we are to govern ourselves within this great city as we engage with employees, residents, business owners, etc.? Well, those are the policies and procedures. And whenever they need to be updated, we should be looking at those. And we should be, with staff's help, evaluating when those things need to change, right? And discussing what those changes might be. Sometimes they change or need to be modified because of changes in the law. Back in January 2015, when we decided we're going to add abusive conduct as part of the module to our AB 1825 training that says bullying is prohibited, right? We didn't necessarily make it a cause of action or unlawful, but we said it should be part of the training that we prohibit bullying in the city of Victorville. Some people felt the need to, moments like that, just as an example, to maybe modify their policy on those prohibitions of discrimination, sexual harassment, retaliation, to add abusive conduct. And so those are moments when we do it, but overall, when we haven't looked at it in a while, we should be looking at it to ensure we are covering the world in 2022, right? With things like social media that are out there and could impact what we do. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. And then the rest of it is we each, as an employee of Victorville, right now, thinking as an employee of Victorville, I may have my unique paradigm, one of 8 billion that I mentioned earlier. One thing I need to do when I get here and start my employment is align that paradigm with the policies and procedures that this governance team adopts so that I conduct myself accordingly, right, with those here in the city who I interact with, whether it's one of you or anybody else that I might encounter in my work. So policies and procedures, you set the framework for how we conduct the business of Victorville. And then one of the things that really you can do, and you can get some help from members, employees, staff, et cetera, here at the city, but a lot of this is on your shoulders. Communicating that vision, right, collectively and individually to those who you serve, the people who demand on remaining informed of their business, right? They haven't yielded anything. So where do we do that? Sometimes you do it when you get invited to speak at community volunteer groups, right? You've been invited to a Lions Club or somewhere else to share a message about whatever the context is that they're speaking of that day. Or you are at a Chamber of Commerce event and there are residents and others there. You definitely have the opportunity to communicate what it is we're trying to achieve. But in order for that to happen, we need to have a vision and understand it, right? And then be able to unpack that and describe it in general terms, not all the detail, but just in general terms. You know, we're really striving hard as a city to improve our response time to blah, 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 blah. And we're really focused that by the next 5 years, we're going to have done some really significant capital outlays to change blah, 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 blah. What are those things, right? This is the messenger right here, the governance team, each of you in your roles. That is a big part of what you do. And if you're doing it effectively, there are very few questions about what you're engaged in, right, to that end. And then lastly, and not least certainly, you hire somebody to be the boots on the ground to lead the effort to achieve that vision. Hiring and retaining a city manager can mean all the world in a city being successful in what it's trying to achieve. In this context now, you have hired City Manager Keith Metzler. How long ago was that, Keith, that you became city manager? 5 years ago? All right, 5 years ago. It feels like an eternity. Sorry. He said that, right? Don't make fun of him this time, but he couldn't help it. So the goal of hiring that city manager is you feel they have all the tools, abilities, know-how, understanding to effectively take that vision and turn it into responsibilities for various delegated to various directors, and then tasks for other managers to achieve, etc. Do they have the ability to do that? Can they communicate to the team? Can they delegate effectively without abdicating responsibility? Can they in turn communicate back to you some of the challenges that we're experiencing in trying to achieve these outcomes? Can they shepherd this? Whatever leadership style they are using, there may be one dominant leadership style for that city manager, but what the leadership gurus tell us today is that the most effective leaders are constantly doing this, taking off their democratic leadership style hat and putting on their autocrat, because we're in crisis and we need a decisive moment here. And we need a leader who's going to decide now, right? We need that authoritative leader. And then they take that one off and put on their affiliative leader hat. And then they put on another hat, not because they are a chameleon or trying to please everybody, but because we've learned by 2022, we've started the third decade of the 21st century, and we've learned that not all people can be led the same way. They simply can't. We need to alter our style. I know people like to say it, and I've said it myself, but I don't say it anymore. My wife and I, in our 35 years of marriage, we have 5 children, all adults now. And I'd love to be able to say, hey, we raised them all the same way. But we didn't. Looking back, they were different personalities. And some we had to be more micromanaging of when it came to following up on assignments and schoolwork. There's a couple of them, 3 of them, that we never had to look at their schoolwork. We did occasionally, but rarely had to. They were self-motivated, structured, and my wife ran a pretty tight ship with that many kids, almost a paramilitaristic organization where structure drives behavior and consequences were real for myself included. And so people did what they were supposed to do. And when somebody sort of deviated from that expectation, those are the ones we had to do a little bit more hand-holding, managing, etc. So we didn't do exactly the same raising, but we, cared for them all the same, loved them all the same, and met their needs all the same when it came to, food, clothing, shelter, etc. But leaders need to be constantly addressing their style to be most effective with who it is that they are leading in the moment, especially as they're part of leading a city. So hiring a city manager, you've done a very effective job in the governance teams. I feel like I've done a very effective job so many times, right? With so many of your city managers in the 20 years that I've been around here. And so that is critical. All right. Any questions about those 4 areas? Do you want to disagree at all or take issue with any of those?
Anyone? I think we're good.
Okay. So carrying then forward, let's talk about keeping you safe as a council governance team, right? And how we do that. I'm just going to read this slide. I typically don't, as you know. Stay safe and immune from liability by letting the city manager discharge their duties consistent with the mandate of the city's municipal code. This is a big part of this style of a city, right? When it comes to a council manager type of structure, that according to your own code that was adopted by your predecessors, there's specific language that speaks to these things. I'm not going to belabor a lot of these points and I won't read every slide, but let's go through some of those so you see the context that I'm speaking of, and then I'll point to the areas of the government code that provide you with that protection from liability and responsibility. So under your municipal code, the Office of City Manager was created. And it's determined that this council are the ones who get to appoint somebody to that role of city manager. Now, like the people who don't abdicate their responsibility or ownership of the business, I should say, you don't abdicate your responsibility, right? When a city manager doesn't do something that you expect them to do, the responsibility for something not happening always rests with you, right? You are the governance team. So that always rests with you, and you can delegate, but not abdicate responsibility. And the goal is to find that city manager who continues to discharge the things that you feel are the priorities and the priority that you would like them done, and have those discussions where you might have some different ideas about why, what, when, what resources we have, and what's realistic. If you have that, you're further downstream than many of the cities I work with. The city manager's duties and responsibilities are outlined. Basically, they have the responsibility, with a few limitations, of hiring people at the city, of ensuring that people are discharging their duties and responsibilities, that people are compliant with those policies and regulations that you have established, and how people should engage themselves here at the city. And they can delegate a lot of that responsibility to support units. One of the critical support units in any organization, especially local government, is human resources, right? Managers are critical, and they need help many times to manage the most valuable asset that the city of Victorville has. It's a beautiful building. It's a beautiful property, nice campus that we have in the city of Victorville City Hall, adjacent to the courts here. But it's not the most valuable assets, nor is any other tangible asset. The most valuable asset are the people working for the city of Victorville. And sometimes, because we don't know how to deal with a situation, we need to turn to a resource for managing the human asset. That's where we get the name human resources, right? Those resources available to help us engage in the best practices to lead, guide, rechannel somebody's energies and performance, etc. And they're there. So city manager has responsibility and can delegate those to other folks within the organization. City managers ensuring that your vision of protecting the city of Victorville from fire, other emergencies, law breaking, etc., is happening. So he works with great leaders like a police chief, or in our case, right, I think we have a contract with the county sheriff, is that right? Right, and our appointed leader in that situation, our fire chief, etc. And ultimately, right, if those things are happening, then he's discharging or she's discharging her duties and powers as the city manager. Authority over employees in every department, working through our city manager. Now, this one is tough for some of my cities, especially my smaller cities that maybe don't have the sophistication of Victorville. Um, you know, everybody knows each other. I know it feels that way here, but it's even more so there, where like the mayor is married to one of the 7 FTEs in the city, right? And then their nephew is the local animal control person, and their next door neighbor is an employee full time of the city, and then that next door neighbor married the stepson of the mayor, right? So all that gets intertwined like that, and there's this sense then with folks in those kinds of situations that they can, you know, just have conversations and tell a director, you know, of public works, hey, why do I keep seeing these trash bins so full at our park on Main Street that everybody travels through and gets their first impression of our little town, right? And that council member is saying, whatever you're doing, change the order. I want you to prioritize this. And the council member in an individual capacity was giving directives to well, it's a director of a department of 2, right? And still, whether it's a department of 200 or a department of 2 or a department of 1, in your individual roles, right? If there's work that you feel needs to be done, you share that with your city manager. That keeps you safe. That keeps you within all the protections from individual liability and the work that you're doing. Work through your city manager. Any questions about that?
No.
I think we're good.
Okay. Power appointment or removal, self-explanatory there in your municipal code. I'm going to read one part of it. It shall be the duty of the city manager to, and he shall appoint, remove, promote, demote any and all subordinate appointive officers and employees of the city, but excepting the city attorney, right? Sacred protection over here, right? Don't mess with the city attorney, all right? City manager. Subject to all personnel ordinances, et cetera, right? So it's pretty straightforward. This is standard, pretty standard language. You know, it's part of some model municipal ordinance code that many cities will have that will reflect and mirror this very language. It's pretty typical. Continuing on, when things happen that are not in compliance with those policies and procedures, somebody makes a complaint, whether it's a discrimination, harassment, or some concern about ethics, whatever the situation may be, it is the responsibility of the city manager to appoint or oversee the investigation of those things. Unless it involves the city manager's office, then it would turn to our city attorney more than likely, haven't looked at the specifics on your structure, to lead and guide that investigation and ultimately report back to you if anything needs to change or there's any outcomes that you need to be made aware of. So all this stuff is the day-to-day operation of the city, including understanding this relationship right here, right? The city council and its members shall deal with the administrative services of the city only through the city manager. That's a pretty straightforward express language in your code governing your conduct, right? Except for purposes of inquiry, and neither the city council nor any member thereof shall give orders to any subordinates of the city manager. So this isn't an opinion or best practice that I'm sharing with you when I share that. This is your municipal code, right? That governs your conduct. So it's not, you know, my favorite way of doing things. This is you telling you what to do and your predecessors and you buying into that. That is a big part of that. Now, there are a number of times where it's inadvertent. Nobody wakes up and goes, oh, as a council member, right? And says, hope I get myself in hot water today, right? I hope I do something to embarrass the city today. Or I hope, but sometimes situational things happen. And for example, we'll talk about a couple here in a moment on a couple slides, but I talked to you earlier about one of your roles is to communicate, right? The message, the vision of this great city, but how you do it, where you do it, when you do it matters tremendously. So stay in your role as a governance team member, right? And you'll be safe. That's critical because of this right here. This is Government Code Section 820.9. I am going to read this with you so we're all on the same page. Members of city councils, mayors, members of boards of supervisors, members of school boards, members of governing boards of other local public entities, members of locally appointed boards and commissions, and members of locally appointed and elected advisory bodies. That's pretty much everybody, right, at this local government level, are not, right, should underline not there, vicariously liable for injuries caused by the act or omission of the public entity or the advisory board, right? So you're not individually responsible. You're not vicariously liable. You didn't do it, but the city did it, so someone's going to sue you, right? A city truck, right? Running into somebody else in somebody's property. And now they're going to sue the city because, you know, we couldn't find a way to resolve that short of availing ourselves of the court system. Well, somebody may try because they may not know. You may have an inexperienced lawyer who will try and name you, you know, as individual council members to something like that, but you're not vicariously liable for those types of acts. You have immunity. You have immunity. The only time you start to get away from that protection, and let me back up. What's the public policy reason behind this immunity? Well, imagine if you could be vicariously liable for the acts of individuals of the city, employees of the city, contractors of the city, et cetera. Some contracting team we hired to fix a couple of roads or update our infrastructure of water pipes, et cetera, and somebody was injured. And everybody could be sued who's connected with the city, especially the elected folks. That would have an absolute chilling effect on people interested in local government roles and civic duty like this, right? There are other things that already have a chilling effect. Let's not add to it by creating things like vicarious liability or other such things. So that's the policy reason behind it. Stay safe, stay in your role, and you will be fine. You will absolutely be fine, and you have been, and you will continue to be so. So one caveat here though, so we're clear. Nothing in this section, nothing, exonerates an official from liability for injury caused by the individual's own wrongful conduct. Emphasis there by me, right? Nothing in this section affects the immunity of any other public official. So that's my underline and that language, just so we're clear. If it's caused by your own individual wrongful conduct, what that means is in your description of your role as a member of this governance team, nowhere does it say engage in tortious behavior toward an individual, you know, of the city, a resident, an employee of the city, et cetera. So if you do engage in conduct along those lines, I don't know that intentionality is required. If that ever is a question, right, the intent rather than the impact of it all, those are questions we can turn to our great city attorney and the firm too. But the bottom line is wrongful conduct, that which violates the law. Could be, you know, in California, we have an express right of privacy, for example. United States Constitution doesn't give us an express right, it's an implied right. 3 or 4 different places in the United States Constitution. But in California's Article 1, we have an express right of privacy. So if we start to engage in that sort of thing, that could be an intentional act, our own wrongful conduct, right? If we're violating any employees, for example, privacy rights, or we engage in an effort to interfere with their rights to their employment as a public entity employee, maybe violates Skelly rights or other such things. Those are intentional acts, right? Wrongful acts. And so that would eliminate some of that protection. Just illustrating a couple points. That should be the only portion of my Scared Straight program on this, my intervention. Any questions about that part of it?
Anyone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So then pressing forward, let's talk specifically about some pitfalls, right? I always try to update this every year for my clients to address things that I'm reading about that become headlines or that are actual cases that come up, a variety of things. So let's start with the first one. In alignment with that one element that I shared, which is you're the mouthpiece, if you will, right? You are the ones who are out there communicating the vision of this governance team for this great city. However, do not lose sight of the fact that if you say it, there are 2 people writing down notes of what you said. There are 8 people recording it on their phone, And there are several others, who are recording it, in some covert way, because they think they need to. People will remember what you say, where you say it, how you said it in every instance. You may think that words like these can protect you, and I don't think many of you think this, but that's just my general statement in this moment. This is off the record, right? That is just never going to be a protecting statement. It just isn't. Public statements. So if you were speaking at, going back to my examples, right, a Lions Club meeting, a volunteer group, right, that provides for the homeless, and they want you to come and speak at their annual holiday luncheon, or you're at a Chamber of Commerce event speaking to a cluster of people. You're in this public setting, you're making public statements. If they are said in a way that suggests you are representing the view of the governance team, that can be very, very problematic. Very problematic. Where that really comes into play, making promises, right? Promises and public statements that sound like you are going to be allocating resources in a particular way. It sounds a little bit, I don't mean to in any way be offensive by the statement. I say that because somebody was once offended by the statement, but I continue to use it because it's illustrative. And that is this. I remember when I was in the 6th grade, I was running for vice president of Ramona Elementary School in Hawthorne. It was 1976, 75, somewhere in there. And I think I promised the world, right? Longer recesses, better lunches, and so forth. I was writing checks that I could not cash, right? But in that setting, it did not come back to haunt me, right? In that situation. In this world where everything, and I mean everything, is recorded, we need to ensure that we are mindful and that in the moment we say something, if we realize, hey, that was inaccurate, that sounded like I was speaking for the council and I was not, right? Correct it in the moment if you catch it. Correct it when you can as soon as you figure it out, but try at all costs to avoid those statements because they become the headlines and they become very challenging situations and could be the moments where we breach the public trust. And that is so hard to gain back, right? So hard to gain back. So be mindful of your public statements, the things that you say, how you say them, to who you say them, it all matters. And it's not just speaking, of course, right? It's interacting, the local newspaper, texting you because they have your cell phone. Hey, can we get a statement on this issue about this employee who's filed this complaint against the city? Right? That's one of those things that we do not comment on. Right? It is a matter of privacy. It's an exception to the transparency law we call the Ralph M. Brown Act. And those matters discussed in closed session for 2 reasons. 1, it's a private personnel matter, and 2, it's pending litigation. We do not comment on those things, period. I know that's part of the orientation we give to our new council members and others, but I need to echo that because it's come up recently and I don't understand it from a seasoned individual who's been in different offices for a while and they're commenting on pending litigation. So be mindful of that, right? Be mindful. It's not just what you say, it's emails, texting, whatever context you find yourself in. Any questions about public statements or do you want any clarification? I don't even deliver safe harbors on this one. Well, what is safe to say? I can't even answer that without all the facts, right?
Anyone? We're doing very well listening.
You are. I feel like you're all very veteran and at this stuff, and that our member Harriman is taking it all in.
Member Harriman.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris.
Can you please speak into your mic?
Give me an example of the way to handle that from the newspaper, okay? Because I know that's going to happen, and I just don't think everything just should say go talk to Keith, right?
I think, and
I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, use discretion. Don't get me wrong, but there's got to be something.
well, if somebody's calling you or emailing you and saying, hey, we understand they have new trams at the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway, right? Have you had a chance to go see those, Council Member Harriman? And what's your opinion? I think on stuff like that, you're in good shape responding, right? If it's nothing about the affairs of the city, it's personnel, matters pending before the city. Hey, we see that you're going to have a vote on that planning commission variance that was voted on in the affirmative. Now it's coming before the council. What do you think are the concerns the city residents should have? Those types of things. We never
And
respond to
that's
those.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's either what do you think, or what do you think, or do you? I had it in my head a minute ago, and now I've lost it. It it'll go two ways. What's a matter of opinion, and what is a matter of fact? So
That is a
when it's a matter of opinion, where does it draw the line? Where is the line for that?
that's a great question. It's a great query, and I believe both our city manager and our city attorney, just in their experience, will agree with me on this. And if you don't, please chime in. The line is so blurred between opinion and fact in the minds of media, any media, right? Whether it's a long established generation old newspaper in the city or in the region, in the county, or it is a brand new blogger. The line between fact and opinion and how it's characterized is so blurred now that it is so hard to distinguish, what is said, what's not, based on how they present it to the world. So there are so many things that I know we want to opine on as individual leaders in this great city, but so much of it carries weight. And there should be no problem with this answer. You know what? Let me get back to you with my response to that. And then talk to someone to make sure that what we're saying is okay, or return back and say, hey, you know what? I don't have an opinion at this time, if that's what you're counseled to do.
I got a good one.
Okay.
What if the question is, what do you think about your city manager doing this or that? And I'm only being, I'm not insinuating
Yeah,
anything, but when they, if the context or the content is, what do you think about this decision of the city manager to do whatever? Because then it's limiting me to say, I need you to, I mean, you don't say, well, go ask him. Am I making sense there?
yeah. No, I understand the question. I do think we're still at the same position, though. There's two problems there. One is if it's any comment from you that is suggesting an opinion about the performance of the city manager, that could be problematic because you're discussing a personnel issue, right? Would you agree with that generally?
Yes, that would be a big concern. I think even to the extent you try to qualify it, say this is my personal opinion, personal only opinion. It's not the opinion of the city council. It may give you some level of protection, but you're right. When you're getting into personnel issues, very, very dangerous.
I was just trying to think of something that would be difficult to answer. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to think I'm looking to be a troublemaker.
No, not at all. Not at all. I would have no context for that, to think that you're a troublemaker. I don't think that. I think the opposite, that you're a new member of this team who's going to bring to it what we need, right, to add to the great team we already have. So,
If I might,
oh,
maybe
go
do
please.
a little bit of a walkthrough of what I could see as a really tough one for any council member, not just Bob. And I can't say I can see it happening here, but I've certainly seen it, in the industry in other cities, perhaps where you have an employee, that might be unhappy because their supervisor just got terminated or something happened, but outside of the closed doors that we live in when it comes to personnel matters, that's the issue or the reason is not known because we can't discuss that. But of course, you've got the speculation of the employee, and of course, then they have a relationship, and maybe they're related to the council member. You never know. But perhaps walk through a scenario like that where it yields the question, well, what do you think about, that particular case where, so-and-so is no longer here?
Yeah, so that's kind of where you were going. Yeah, no, he just has more experience in real life situations, as we do in this work. So in moments like that, it is going to be so hard to walk that line between opinion, as was pointed out by our city attorney, and fact and so forth, and not breaching, confidentiality things, etc. For me, if I'm going to give you advice on anything related to the description that our city manager just used as a hypothetical, it would be, at the city, we always strive to do our very best to provide a great workplace environment for everybody. And those decisions that are made, we rely on a city manager to make, and that's where it ends, kind of thing. That was not well thought out, but it's a general statement about, our role. We're not in the weeds, right? And so I may not have an opinion about it. And many times you won't. You won't. You'll just see that it happened. You'll know that it happened. Like, okay, you'll be neutral on it, and so that's an okay statement to make. Please continue. Pull your microphone
I
down.
don't want to dwell on this, but what if the question is, what do you think about another council member?
Yeah, I've always liked Liz. Um, how have you handled that? You three have been asked questions like that. It might be more instructive to hear from you how you've handled those types of things. Is it just straight no comments? Or is it more along the lines of general statements like, I appreciate the opportunity to work with anybody willing to perform their civic duty and da-da-da-da. What, Madam Mayor, you're well-spoken.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that. I stick my foot in my mouth often enough. So on that subject, because this council has had to deal with lots of tricky issues over the years, this council and the prior council, and we might have our own opinions, and sometimes there's talk amongst ourselves, but we ought not to air our dirty laundry, number one. Or the goal of each of us should be that each council member is successful, right?
Yes.
If we're all successful, it's a gain for the city. And so for me, I always because I get asked a lot. And I mean, I had someone the other day, say, the city can make a lot of money if you charge for pay-per-view, right? Because it can get heated at times. And so for me, it's really about, look, I understand what you might be saying. I hear what you're saying, but the reality is this person was duly elected, and I'm going to do what I need to do to help him or her be successful. And but I do mean that, but it doesn't mean that life behind the dais is easy. And people know that. But I think that they respect if you take a position that seems reasonable and it's fair and amidst difficult times. So that's what I
Thank you.
always do.
Appreciate that. Anybody want to add to that or your thoughts on it?
I kind of don't agree with that. I think a council person should be entitled to have an opinion of another council member without being subject to legal or any repercussions. I believe I hear that all the time, that type of thing, whether it's on the television or whatever. But I'm thinking that doesn't fall in line with city staff and city business.
So this is one of those moments we talked about.
I know I probably brought up a real.
No, but I do appreciate that completely. But I always look at it from the perspective that we are to inspire confidence in city leadership. And it doesn't mean that I give a false answer. It just means that I give a reasonably fair answer. And I'm not talking about like legal issues. I'm just talking about fairness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to go back to your point, Member Harriman.
So I also want to say that is not what I'm thinking about doing. Okay, I'm just trying to come up with a difficult thing to deal with.
It's difficult.
So please, everybody,
it's difficult.
Don't be afraid of me. Okay.
Yeah. No. I appreciate what you're saying, and the query is a good one because you're learning this role. These are good questions. Seriously, these are good questions. I will say when it comes to your comments, council members are entitled to opinions, but council members, I would have to say that is protected by the Constitution of the United States of America. There's no question. You are entitled to your opinion on those things. And it comes back to that paradigm comment we made earlier in our discussion that do you want to be right or do you want to do what's right for this governance team, right? And you'll answer that question, Member Harriman, in situations depending on where you find yourself. Don't ever get lulled into a false sense of security, like, you know, you feel like this. Well, with these folks who I've known for 10 years, I can really speak my mind, right? Because that always comes back to bite you. I'm just sharing that with you now so you can learn from other people's mistakes, right? And I will share with you that you can have those opinions. It's rare the moments where it would be in the best interest of this governance team to express those opinions to others. You can couch it in terms of, I think, as was pointed out by our good mayor, hey, you know what? There are 5 of us on this governance team. We're all different. I'm sure some of them have challenges with me. And it sounds like you're really frustrated with our mayor, you know, because of X, Y, or Z that you just mentioned. You know, you're certainly entitled to that opinion. I'm not saying that others don't have it, but this is a team I'm trying to work with to improve things in all areas, including those that you just described, right? There's an answer, I think, that gets you there, that keeps you aligned with the collective here, and is going to improve the likelihood that the things that you feel are really important for this city and in the best interest of this city are going to get the support of this team. Not because you're playing ball, because you're scratching each other's back, but because you're thinking of the greater good as opposed to your individual need or worth or desires, right? And that's my only advice on that. So I'm not contradicting your idea of having those opinions at all. I'm just saying being right versus doing the right thing for the team, I think is important.
Again, I was just trying to think of a real difficult one to answer.
So for everybody listening, right, these are hypotheticals. There's no brewing things, right, that we're talking about.
Jerry, can
Yes.
I just add to that a little bit, just some perspective, because I think the question was sharing an opinion about a council member, and let's just assume that the question is maybe akin to perhaps what we're used to experiencing, especially when the public comes in and of course they share their opinions with us about us, and let's just assume that they're all less than positive kind of thing. And so when we're talking about those less than positive opinions, you know, certainly I think we've learned from the legal perspective that public can say anything that they want about an elected official, and there's nothing that really can be done about that from a legal perspective. And I suspect council members saying something negative about one another, you know, if they were to answer their opinion and that was their opinion, that there's likely limited liability there, if no liability. And so that's a different kind of liability that I think we've been talking about more, you know, from the corporate perspective, in trying to protect the city. However, where I, as staff, you know, concern myself about those kinds of comments, even though it might not bring financial liability, if you will, it certainly brings reputational liability. And so from the staff perspective, you know, with that type of behavior happening, you know, certainly what it does create is a potential for the public to see and interpret from that the council doesn't get along, or they're fighting, or it's just reputational negativity, to where the liability that you get from that is different. You know, if the reputation of the council and the city is less than positive because of those behaviors, that could translate into making it more difficult to hire qualified staff, or maybe even invite more competitive contracting when it comes to public works or things like that. So that's where I would say, you know, with respect to the opinions, First Amendment right, Jerry's absolutely right. You have those abilities, but the consequences could be not financially damaging to the city in that particular case, but certainly the reputational could impact our ability to do business.
Very good. So it does erode the trust, you know, and bigger picture things as well. I'm thinking one of my clients here in Southern Cal who has a measure they're going to need passed next year. They work awfully hard to build that trust, maintain that trust, and provide excellent customer service because they never wanted in doubt that these measures aren't going to be passed by the public they serve because they need it. If they don't get it passed, it's a measure that was last passed 10 years ago. Um, they're in dire straits, right? But they're not concerned about it because of the relationship they have and the way their leadership team, their governance team conducts themselves builds that trust, doesn't erode the trust to that end. So thank you for those comments, all of it. Thank you for the queries, the questions.
And can I
Appreciate
just
the
add
discussion.
a couple more things? Sometimes, people ask us questions and we have to be mindful that we could be being polled on an issue that's coming up. So I always try to be careful and couch that in such a, that I'm listening and I'm, and I let them know that I'm, learning everything I can about it. I'm looking at the staff reports and I'm looking forward to discussions behind the dais with my colleagues to make the best decision I can because boy, if people have talked to a few council members, all of a sudden it's out there in social media and then all of a sudden they're declaring that the decisions come in and this is what it's going to be. And that's not healthy because then it does look like the council isn't listening to public comment during a council meeting or because they're pre-deciding something, right? That, and then the other thing, just very briefly that was taught to me years ago and it always rings true for me. And I try to put it into play. I'm not 100% on it for sure, but the way we treat one another as a council and the governance team, which includes the city manager and his executive team, says more to the public about who we are as a city than any decision we make. And I've always held that close to my heart because I've seen it come true many, many times.
Marvelous comments. I appreciate that. Good discussion by all. I appreciate that. Perfect segue with your comment on social media, getting wind through some kind of informal polling because we're going to move into social media. But one comment just to piggyback onto our mayor's comment about how we treat each other. The syndicated columnist for the Washington Post years ago wrote this and it just resonated with me. He said, somebody who's nice to you but is not nice to the waitress is not a nice person. And that just resonated with me tremendously. And I witnessed it after that was put on my radar, right? And I thought, oh, okay, you're nice to us, but not nice to them. People see that and it's challenging. So on the subject of social media, this is just a different form of public statements, right? That's why they're on this slide together. Our social media is just inextricably intertwined, it seems like, with our current life experience out there. I finally gave in 2016 because my clients wanted me to have on a slide social media contact. So I started a social media account on Facebook on 2016. Facebook was dead by 2016 to many people, or it's an old person's social media. And here I am, starting my Facebook page and a Twitter account, etc. And so it's out there. I may not use it a lot, but boy, it gets used a lot. And you know what I found out? I like looking at it. I like seeing who's on Facebook and old acquaintances and where people are from high school, etc. So I will just share with you that social media does have its protections, like I mentioned earlier, right? For our free speech, etc. You have to expect that anything put out there on social media will be taken as gospel if one of the five of you says it, right? It will be seen as, so let it be written, so let it be done. And that's just the truth. And they will twist it and they will quote you. And it will be the headline of our newspaper, right? A quote, mayor says this, boom. And well, it's on your social media page, right? And so there it is. And they'll try to confirm it with you. And sometimes they'll make the effort, sometimes they won't, but there they are. So be mindful. Social media is a place for expression. And if you want to express some concerns you have in general, comments about things in public general, it's fine. But if it's anything pending business before the city, if it's issues that we anticipate coming up in the city, if it's hot issues from the election cycle you just went through, and you're commenting on those because others are, just maybe attacking you on social media, be very careful. Be very careful. The comment we heard earlier, I believe it was from our good mayors, we have to be thick-skinned. You really do have to be thick-skinned. Maybe rhinoceros skin, not alligator, rhinoceros. And as our city manager pointed out, members of the public, it seems like they can speak freely about anything. They can come right here to this microphone and look you in the eyes and say things that are uncivil, unkind, right? And personally attacking about you and others. That doesn't give us license to mirror that behavior. Leaders in any context, governance team, city executive leadership, or managers, directors, etc., do not have the luxury of losing control of their emotions. And that's especially true of members of this governance team, right? You don't have that luxury. No matter how we try to spin it, you're going to seem out of control. You're going to seem, unfit, right, in the context of how people will describe you. And so remember, somewhere between that data input, whether it's social media, here at this podium, or anywhere else, somewhere between that data input into your unique paradigm, before your data output, your reaction, your response, is a golden moment for you to say to yourself, I am not going to let this person take control of me. Right? A principle I learned years ago driving on the great freeways of Southern California. Somebody does something driving, and there were times when, the younger version of me would get pretty hot-headed about it. Can you believe that? They almost hit me, right? Yeah, but they didn't. It was a dumb move, and it was dangerous and reckless, but they didn't, And yeah, but they could have. They don't know, and I'm riding their bumper now. Now who's the one creating a reckless situation, right? I don't know if that happened more than one time, but upset happened a lot. But the reckless part didn't really happen that often. That's been a long time ago and a different version of me because of my understanding of that golden moment. After data input, before data output, I'm going to stay in control of Jerry Preciado. That's my objective, right? I honestly don't even let the people I love control my emotions. They can trigger a lot of good emotion and some frustrations, but I don't even let the people I love and care for, my closest confidants with whom I have intimate connections, control me, let alone total strangers, right? Or people in this uncivil and adversarial world we live in. We live in a world like never before where if we disagree, it's not enough. We have to make it adversarial. And they will bait you on social media, right? And there have been moments where governance teams are baiting each other on social media. And it's just never going to be okay to give in to that. So am I just supposed to, let them say whatever they want and do whatever they want on those platforms? My answer to that is yes, right? If something crosses a line where you need to protect your rights being compromised, right? As a public figure, that doesn't compromise your rights, but if there's something that does, like compromising your safety, compromising identity theft, things like that, then we do take steps. But beyond that, we typically say, okay, right, another person. And most of the rational world looks at those extreme opinions and blows them off. They look at the source and blow them off anyway, even though it's hard for some of us to do so because they're about us. They are. Any questions about that, or anyone have a concern or example they'd like to give about that? All right, a couple more slides and we're going to be done. So this one here, the appearance of impropriety, this takes a lot of, this manifests itself in a lot of different ways. When we do the ethics training every couple years for our clients, we make sure that we cover this one up front and then at the end again. Even avoiding the appearance of impropriety, right? So back when I was still doing trial work and was representing a law firm, they had been sued for legal malpractice. The reason they were sued for legal malpractice because they were trying to collect a bill. They had won a case lost a case for their client, but the client had paid them a lot of money and didn't want to pay the balance, which was several $100,000. And so they sued to collect because they couldn't work it out. And then the countersuing was a legal malpractice, right, lawsuit, cause of action for legal malpractice. And that triggered our client calling me and saying, will you represent this firm? Well, one of the partners of the firm had left, and she was now a presiding judge over one of our great county superior courts in California. So when we went to this binding arbitration, which was called for under the contract between the parties, at the end of it, we prevailed. how could I lose? I had myself there, but I had 4 other lawyers supporting me in the whole thing because I was representing the firm. We were at a celebratory lunch in downtown San Jose, and Original Joe's, if you know downtown San Jose. And I went to pay the bill for these clients, and the judge pulled out her wallet, and I'll call her Janet. And I said, "Oh, Janet, there's no need. I got this covered. You know, it's traditional for the client. I mean, the lawyer to pay for the victory dinner." She goes, "Not for me. I can't let you do that." I said, "Oh, that's right." I said, "Well, you know what? We are 6 counties away from your county. No one's gonna know I spent $22 for your lasagna, right?" And this was the moment where my character was revealed to me. When she put her purse down for a minute, she crossed her hands on the table and said, "Jerry, I'll know." And just go right to the heart on that one. And it just really illustrated a point where I thought, as a person of character, I was honest. I kept the laws and only spat occasionally, right, and so forth. But she was taking it to a level that I needed to get to. And she did. I said, "You know what? You're right. That's $22. And if we're being honest here, probably another $5 for the tip." So she did her thing, and she taught me a very valuable lesson that I haven't forgotten. That was 24 years ago. And I'll never forget that, and I appreciate her for it. So even the appearance of impropriety, what does that look like, right? So when it comes to your role, if we know somebody has pending business before this governance team, before the city, the people's business here, and you are out seen socializing or engaging in public appearances with that person, that is not necessarily going to violate any ethical laws or conflict of interest laws per se, right? You may not personally benefit from the contract if it happens for this individual or entity. You may not have any interest in it beyond you thinking it's in the best interest of the city, but boy, it looks bad when it's viewed that way from members of the public. So that's the judge standard. Avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So whether it's being seen socially or in public at activities with somebody with business pending here before the city, or doing other things that maybe aren't public, but could be discovered, like going to their cabin with them for a weekend getaway, right, with your family and their family, right? Those types of things. Again, it may not violate a conflict of interest laws. We'd have to look at the facts, right, with those that can analyze such things. But typically, it looks really bad. So that's even the appearance of impropriety in those situations. Any questions about that as governance team members?
Is your mic on?
Yeah. As employees, we used to hear that all the time. Do you know who I am? I won't let you know what my response was, but
Yeah.
don't use that on the please. The employees work for him. They don't work for us.
Yeah.
So, we need to be careful with that. Do you know who I am?
Yeah. That is the absolute perfect segue into the next example on this one, appearance of impropriety. It's as if I planted our mayor pro tem to give that right then, because it's leading into what we call, perceptions of or actual abuse of, position or authority, right? You may not be an abuse of authority to real life situations. Somebody walked into the, new Java house that was in one of my cities up north, small city, and everybody knows each other. And the owner of this business is one of the many enterprises they have in this town. And this council member can't stand each other, right? But it's free coffee and donuts. So that council member is going to show up, which is their reputation, is going to go participate in the situation. And so when they get there, the owner just busting chops a little bit. "Of course, I should have known you were going to show up for free stuff." To which the council member says, "Yeah, I'm here for the coffee and donuts. And because I'm just here for that, I'm not going to notice all those boxes you have blocking the emergency exit. That could be a building code violation, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and da-da-da-da-da-da," right, kind of thing. And can you see what looked like a veiled or implied threat there? a power trip kind of thing, right, going on. So that's what we want to do, avoid any of that appearance of impropriety. You all probably saw the national headlines in Tampa, right, with the police chief in Tampa. They're in the golf cart with their husband driving it, and they get pulled over because it's not tagged or whatever's supposed to happen. And she asks, "Is your camera on?" He says, "Yes, it is." She knows it's on, but clearly still doesn't feel she's doing anything wrong here when she flashes the badge and said, "We're hoping you can overlook it," right? So she immediately issued an apology, you know, and it's tough. It's tough in 2022 because of this cancel culture world that we're in. And it used to feel like it was just on one side, but it's on all sides now. It's like everywhere. It's like, you know, a tit for tat situation. Everybody wants this to happen now, depending on their personal agenda. But it's tough. And I thought she's not going to survive this, and she didn't. She resigned shortly after giving that apology. Personally, you know, with the apology, the mistake that was made, I thought she might be able to survive it in a context of, but in the end, it's too much. National headline, an embarrassing element there to the city of Tampa and the region. So the abuse of power or the subtle flexing even we should avoid, right? And the last one on this is this area of impropriety. Be careful as you engage, right? When we talk about not directing the work of the beyond the executive, employees of the city, don't be talking to directors trying to get them to go fix that median, you know, that leads into your development because it's really looking messy. That's just not how it works. If you have a concern about that medium, let's go see Keith and talk about that, and other medians, not just yours, of course, right? We want our medians looking nice, etc. So that doesn't mean you cannot interact with employees of the city in situations where you're there and they're there, like prior to a council meeting. "Hello, Madam Mayor, how are you? You know, how's everything going? How's your husband doing? How's the family? Blah, blah, blah," right? And so forth. So the bottom line there is you can interact. That's not a problem. You know, somebody asked you about that new paint job you have on your car. Nothing wrong with that. You can interact. Where it gets problematic is when familiarity breeds too much comfort. And then they start to say, "Hey, member Harriman, you know, right, our contract is up for renewal as a member of this represented group. Just want to be clear, we're going to be reasonable in it, and we hope the city's reasonable too." What should your answer be in situations like that?
I hope it works out your way.
You're pretty close on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think what you're heading for is, you know, we're always hopeful to work these out in a way that's positive for everybody, right? We hope to work things out in a way that's a win-win situation, right? But you don't know what it is they're saying or implying. You don't know if they're going to take that and go, "Hey, a polling situation. Hey, we have the support of our new council member, Harriman. He really seems friendly to us," right? That's why when it comes to things related to, you know, the National Labor Relations Act, right, which protects people and their ability to join, even if they're not in a representative group, their ability to get together and to form alliance, to talk to one another, to support one another. We don't want to be seen as a governance team individual, right? We don't want to be seen as interfering with any of that or have people use our words against the city, right, to that end. You know, and then it's going to be, "Oh, well, now we know Councilmember Harriman is a liar because he said da 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 da, and now look, he's voted against it, and it was just a reasonable thing. He said if we're reasonable, do it." So, see, that's what happens, right, when it comes to these situations. So avoid any of those discussions. What thoughts or comments do you have on that part? Not getting involved in the labor relations side of things. And one last comment before you say anything, if you do. This is one of those exceptions also to our transparency laws, that when it comes to what this governance team is discussing as it pertains to contracts with represented groups, those can be done in closed session. And because it is a confidential matter, it can be done there. So it's not something we should be discussing openly in the context of individual discussions with people, how we're going to do it, what we see the challenge as, our opinion on what you're asking for, etc. All right, now I come back to you.
Anyone? So, I'm sorry, did you? So I just had one comment on, first of all, represented unions is a whole different ballgame. You have to be ultra, ultra careful for everyone's sake, right? Because you can really damage operations in the city. We have to be very careful to not blur the lines between city manager's office and our role as a council. Um, you know, Lisbeth Seta has always, part of her personality, she's always very good at, cutting to the chase. She's always been able to see that, you're no one. You're a person, I'm a person, you're not better than me, so she was able early on to, see what was really happening when a council member said, do you know who I am? I mean, that's appalling. It really is. But even on a much more nuanced level, if even a council member is talking to an employee, not every employee has that savvy, and they're very affected by how a council member behaves towards them, their demeanor, and anything almost can look to some employees like an evaluation of sorts, right?
Correct.
And so we have to be very careful to not. I mean, even suggestions can sometimes look like pressure to them to perform a certain way, or an opinion, just a general passing comment or opinion can look like a pressure to perform a certain way, right? So we have to be careful. And it goes the same way with praising employees too. I mean, this is because I'm a huggy, kissy person, and it's an area that I think I need to work on. I hope everybody sees that it's genuine for everybody, and I don't want anybody to ever think that I have favorites because I don't know hug and kiss anybody. But
As a employment attorney, right? I'm glad you don't hug and kiss anybody.
so, but well, but just the weight of our position. For some people, it feels very larger than life to them. We need to not feel that way, but we need to recognize that anything coming from us can look like an evaluation.
That's a great statement. And right now I'm dealing with a situation trying to help an employee see that they need to care more about what their manager and their director think regarding their performance, because there are a couple of council members who are well connected with this employee, and this employee is getting a ton of praise from the council members because of the work she is doing as a get it done person. Every city has their get it done guys and get it done gals, right? And hopefully we have more of those than not, but she is definitely somebody who gets things done, and she's very valuable. But it's gotten to the point now where, because of the praise directly from council members, she wants that more than the praise, or is more concerned with that than the praise of those who are actually going to manage her performance. And that's problematic. You're not doing that employee a favor. You're hurting that employee when you put them in that position. Truly, truly. Thank you for that comment. That was it on the appearance of impropriety. I'm going to finish this last one. That I think we've already covered it, actually. The conversations with employees about work. Questions like, or comments like, so how are you enjoying working for the city? Because somebody's new and they introduce themselves. Hey, I just started working here months ago, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and I've really enjoyed it. People really made me feel welcome. That's great. I'm glad you're having that experience, and really just kind of leave it at that, right? And not dwell into it. So what do they have you working on? Then that starts to get into other conversations, or it feels like a license to come to you later if you're not happy with what they have you working on, right? And things like that. So we're not trying to send a message we don't care, and we don't need you to be a robot. We don't. But keep those conversations very cursory in nature, right? And always be appreciative, right? That goes a long way, being appreciative, as long as it doesn't cross the lines that we mentioned a moment ago. Always be appreciative. So when it comes down to it, maintaining the public trust, there are basically 4 guiding principles or questions that we should ask ourselves. Are we acting in the best interest of the public as a governance team? Are we avoiding any self-interested conduct or dealing? This slide is taken from our ethics training. Do not abuse position or authority. We covered that. Avoid even the appearance of impropriety. If these 4 guiding principles are part of your internal analysis when you're in a moment, they are going to help you avoid what could be challenging situations down the road, right? When it comes to it, remember, whether it was a particular segment of our Victorville society that got you elected or you elected or you elected, that doesn't follow then that we are beholden to just that group. You're now in a position where you have a tremendous responsibility of maintaining the public trust that has been placed in you. And those people did not yield their sovereignty for that work, their business, if you will. And maintaining that public trust requires that you're working for the greater good of the city. And those will help us stay in that lane as it is. So the people of this great city, and I do mean it because I've been around long enough, and I have a lot of other cities that I don't use this slide on. The people of this great city elected you, right? So they believe in you. They believe in your use of talents. They did not hire you to create drama at the city. They did not hire you to embarrass the city, right? They did not hire you by way of casting a vote to create situations that are for the benefit of a few, right? They want you to lead us. They want you to provide common or shared objectives and then motivate through our executive team this city's group of employees to achieve that outcome. The only way you can affect positive, sustained change as a council member is as a member of this team. You want to leave a lasting legacy, whether that's just one term, 2 terms, whatever it is that you're here, then be a part of a great team. Be a part of contributing to a great team. Do the right thing for the team rather than trying to be right all the time. That's what we hope becomes the truth with every one of our clients. The city of Victorville, right, where good government and good governance converge. That's the goal with everybody, right? Those two things have to meet. So thank you for your comments, your participation, for the clarifying stuff from our city attorney, city manager. Are there any other questions before I take my seat?
Anyone?
I have another one. If you make a decision on the dais and then somebody a couple days later says, why did you make that decision? How do you handle that?
Well, I think everyone's going to handle it differently, right? And you, Member Harriman, as a individual will handle it, you know, in a way that you feel comfortable with and within the bounds of these safe parameters, these somewhat safe harbors we're talking about to keep yourself safe. For me, I would say, you know, as with all decisions, you know, that I make as a member of the city council, we have information provided to us and we believe and are confident that our city team is providing us with the best information available to make informed decisions. And then we look at what we're trying to achieve for this city as a whole, right? Our objectives, what's in the best interest of the city. And my vote on anything, not just this situation that you're asking me about, is always in line with that. I felt it was in the best interest of the city as a whole and what we're trying to become and what we're trying to maintain here at the city. Do you have any issue with that? You've all been asked that question. All right.
Jared, I just want to say thank you. Not dealing with you, being with you for 20 years. Now some of what you've taught me over the years, finally at my age is making sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I always appreciate your self-deprecating approach, Liz. Appreciate that. Yes, I do. It's been wonderful to work with you over all these years. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity.
We appreciate your being willing to come here, and I'm surprised your eyes are still open with having come here from Minneapolis all in one day. So we appreciate your taking the time
Thank you.
to. And I know that you did research on our council because you have been before us before, so you're familiar with us, and so we appreciate you coming before us again and helping us be better as individual council members and most certainly as a team. Thank you.
Remember, the only obstacles you have to being the best governance team the city's ever had are the ones you place before yourself. So don't place them there. Be the best. Be the best. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, since there's, I mean, that was really our business this evening, and there's nothing else before us. This meeting stands adjourned.